The woman was alone in the snow, her wheelchair half buried, her gloves soaked through. She wasn't waving. She wasn't shouting. She was staring down the road as if she'd already accepted no one was coming back for her. When the dog stopped and refused to move, the man driving almost didn't look. Almost. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. The road narrowed until it felt unfinished, as if it had been abandoned halfway through a decision. Snow erased the edges, swallowing the shoulder and creeping toward the center line. Jack drove slowly, both hands steady on the wheel, eyes forward. He hadn't planned this route. Planning required believing the future could be controlled. The dog sat upright beside him, calm but alert. His ears shifted constantly, tracking sounds Jack couldn't hear over the wind. They had worked together long enough that Jack trusted those ears more than his own instincts. Silence filled the cab, heavy but familiar. As the truck rounded a bend, the dog stiffened. Not abruptly, just enough to matter. His head turned toward the right shoulder, body leaning forward. Jack eased off the accelerator. "What is it?" he muttered. The headlights swept across snow, then metal, then a shape that didn't belong. Too low, too still. He braked. The truck rolled to a stop. Jack stayed seated a moment longer than necessary. Stopping meant involvement. At first, Jack thought it was debris, something pushed aside by the storm. Then the wind shifted, clearing snow from the curved rim of a wheel. A wheelchair, half buried, angled toward the ditch. The woman sat in it, shoulders hunched, coat dusted white. Snow filled her lap and clung to the spokes. Her boots rested neatly on the footplates, toes already numb. She didn't turn when Jack approached. "Ma'am," he called, careful not to raise his voice. She answered without looking at him. "He said he'd be right back." Her voice was steady, controlled. That unsettled him more than panic would have. Jack crouched slightly, lowering himself to her level. The dog padded ahead and sat beside the wheelchair, posture calm, deliberate, blocking some of the wind. "My husband went to get help," she added. "The car got stuck." Jack scanned the road. No headlights, no tracks. The storm had erased everything. The dog pressed closer to the wheel. The woman's hand moved to his head, fingers trembling. "My name's Lena," she said. Jack nodded. "I'm Jack." Jack studied the snow around them, reading it the way training had taught him. No fresh footprints. No sign of return. Whatever decision had been made earlier, the storm had already buried it. "We can't stay here," Jack said. "The cold's getting worse." Lena glanced down at her legs, then back at him. "I know." There was no self-pity in her voice, just acceptance. That unsettled him. Jack reached for the wheelchair handles, then paused. "Is it okay if I move you?" She watched him carefully, measuring something beyond his words. Then she nodded once. The wheels resisted, frozen stiff. Jack leaned into them, pushing slowly. Snow packed under the tires, fighting every inch. The dog stayed close, pacing beside Lena, shoulder brushing her coat. Halfway to the truck, Lena spoke again. "If he comes back and I'm gone, I'll leave markers," Jack said. "He'll find you." It wasn't a promise, just the best truth he had. At the truck, Jack opened the passenger door and froze. Helping her meant lifting her. Jack explained each movement before making it, voice low and deliberate. One arm under Lena's shoulders, one beneath her knees. He felt how light she was, and how tense, like she was holding herself together through will alone. When he lifted her, her breath caught, but she didn't cry out. Her hand gripped his jacket, anchoring herself. For a moment, Jack's body locked, memory flashing sharp and unwanted. The weight, the responsibility. The dog nudged his leg, firm and insistent. Jack moved. He settled Lena into the seat, adjusting her coat, tucking her hands inside. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. "Thank you," she said. Jack nodded, unable to answer. He folded the wheelchair and secured it in the truck bed, hands burning from cold. When he climbed back inside, the cab felt smaller, warmer. They drove in silence. The dog lay between them, head near Lena's boots. Ahead, through the snow, Jack spotted a dark shape. A building. Small. Isolated. He slowed. Walls. For now, walls might be enough. The building turned out to be a maintenance shed, old and narrow, its metal walls rattling under the pressure of the wind. Jack parked the truck close, angling it to block what little shelter the structure could offer. Snow piled quickly against the tires as he shut off the engine. Inside, the air was cold but still. Concrete floor, a workbench scarred by years of use, a single shelf holding rusted tools and a dented lantern. Jack closed the door, and the sudden quiet felt heavier than the storm outside. Lena looked around slowly. "This is fine," she said, more to herself than to him. Jack unfolded the wheelchair and helped her down with careful movements. She bit back a breath as she settled, then relaxed once she was steady. The dog circled once and lay near her feet, body angled toward the door, watchful. Jack shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. She started to refuse, then stopped, fingers tightening around the fabric. "Thank you," she said quietly. Jack turned away, lighting the lantern. Its glow was small but steady. He checked his phone. No signal. He wasn't surprised. Outside, the wind pressed harder. Inside, time slowed. Minutes passed without conversation. The lantern flickered softly, shadows stretching across the walls. Lena adjusted the jacket around her legs, the simple movement leaving her more tired than she expected. Jack noticed. He always did. "You holding up?" he asked. She nodded, then sighed. "I will." The dog lifted his head and nudged her knee gently before resting his chin there. Lena's hand moved into his fur, fingers relaxing for the first time since Jack had found her. "He knows what to do," she said. Jack nodded. "He usually does." Silence returned, not uncomfortable, just full. Lena's gaze drifted back to the door. "My husband doesn't like asking for help," she said. "He thinks if he tries hard enough, things will work." Jack leaned against the workbench. "Trying harder doesn't always mean choosing better." She considered that. "He didn't mean to leave me." "I know," Jack replied. He checked the fuel can, calculating how long the lantern might last. His mind was already moving ahead, mapping options. "You're thinking about going out there," Lena said. "Yes. You don't have to." Jack met her eyes. "I won't leave you alone." The dog's tail thumped once. Jack pulled his jacket back on and marked the shed door with reflective tape. He stepped outside briefly, placing visible markers in the snow leading back to the road. Each one was deliberate, spaced carefully, meant to be seen even if the storm worsened. When he returned, cold clinging to him, Lena was watching closely. "You're going to look for him," she said. "Yes." Her mouth tightened. "He could be anywhere. That's why I have to try." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded paper. "Our numbers," she said. "In case." Jack took it and tucked it safely away. "I'll be back." The dog stood, ears alert, eyes flicking between them. He whined softly. "You stay," Jack told him. The dog didn't move. Jack crouched, pressing his forehead briefly to the dog's. "Guard her." The dog turned and lay beside Lena, body firm and protective. "Be careful," Lena said. Jack nodded and stepped back into the storm. The wind fought him immediately, snow biting at his face. He moved slowly, calling out when the gusts allowed. First, there was nothing. Then, farther down the road, a figure appeared. A man, bent forward, struggling. Jack broke into a careful jog. The man was barely holding himself upright when Jack reached him. His face was raw from cold, eyes unfocused, breath shallow and uneven. He leaned heavily into Jack's support without argument. "My wife," he gasped. She's safe," Jack said firmly. "She's waiting." The words steadied him. They moved slowly back toward the shed, Jack carrying most of the weight as the storm pushed against them. Every step felt earned. When they reached the door, Lena's voice cut through the quiet. "Tom!" Tom looked up, eyes filling instantly. "Lena!" Jack stepped aside as they reached for each other, hands clasping tightly. No explanations, no blame, just relief. The dog wagged his tail and stood, posture easing for the first time. Tom turned to Jack, shame crossing his face. "I thought I could fix it." Jack met his gaze. "You came back. That mattered." They settled inside, Tom wrapping himself carefully around Lena. The lantern cast long shadows across the walls. Outside, the storm continued its work. Inside, something shifted. Jack stood near the door, watching, already aware this moment would carry consequences. This wasn't finished yet. The shed felt smaller now, filled with breathing, quiet sobs, and the low hum of the lantern fighting darkness inside. Jack gave them space, standing near the door, listening to the storm scrape metal and erase the world outside slowly. Tom's arms trembled as he held Lena, not from cold alone, but from fear finally allowed to surface quietly there. Lena rested her forehead against his chest, eyes closed, trusting the moment to hold without explanation or demand anything else. The dog lay beside them, body relaxed, ears alert, sensing the danger had shifted rather than vanished for now nearby. Jack checked his watch out of habit, then stopped, realizing time mattered less than readiness here tonight, somehow still present. He thought about calling for help again, but the signal remained absent, stubborn and unmoved by weather, terrain, fate, alone. Instead, he focused on practical things: water, warmth, positioning, small choices that kept people alive through long, uncertain hours ahead. Tom finally looked up, meeting Jack's eyes with gratitude mixed with embarrassment. He could not hide any more there today now. Jack nodded once, accepting it without comment, understanding how pride complicated survival when stakes felt personal and deeply human here. As minutes passed, Tom's breathing steadied, and Lena's shoulders lowered, exhaustion replacing sharp fear slowly over time together at last. Jack offered water from his pack, holding the bottle while Tom drank with shaking hands carefully, deliberately without rushing him. Lena watched closely, her expression protective, as if guarding him now was her quiet duty again tonight, always somehow here. The dog shifted positions, placing himself between the couple and the door, instinctively choosing vigilance without command, training, words needed. Jack noticed the movement and felt a familiar respect, earned through years of shared danger and quiet trust built slowly. Tom cleared his throat, struggling briefly, then spoke with effort, voice rough but sincere despite fatigue. Cold, fear lingering there. "I shouldn't have left her," Tom said, staring at the floor, shame heavy in the air between them quietly now. Lena reached for his hand, squeezing once, stopping the spiral before it could deepen further tonight here again for them. Jack pretended to adjust his gear, giving them privacy without making it obvious or awkward uncomfortable for anyone present there. Outside, the storm continued, but inside the shed, control slowly returned to human hands and fragile hope followed quietly behind. Jack sat on an overturned crate, listening, understanding this pause mattered as much as action in moments like these here. He had learned long ago that rushing often broke things already struggling to hold together under pressure, stress, fear, alone. Lena finally looked at him directly, studying his posture, his stillness, his restraint with careful curiosity, respect forming quietly there. "You're military," she said, not accusing, simply recognizing patterns she'd seen before in others' faces, movements, silences like his now. Jack didn't deny it, because denial felt unnecessary in a place already stripped bare by weather, circumstance, truth, alone here. Tom watched the exchange quietly, absorbing details, realizing help sometimes came from wounded people too, carrying their own histories silently. Jack met Lena's gaze and nodded once, offering no story, no explanation because none were required, necessary, here tonight now. The dog shifted closer to Jack, leaning against his leg, grounding him without effort, training, command, words spoken there ever. Lena noticed that too, filing it away, understanding loyalty when she saw it expressed quietly through presence, action, patience alone. For the first time, the shed felt less like shelter and more like shared ground between strangers becoming something else. Night pressed closer, darkness thickening beyond the walls, reminding them help was still distant and uncertain, delayed, somewhere outside waiting. Jack checked the lantern again, conserving fuel, adjusting the wick with careful fingers learned through repetition, necessity, experience alone earlier. Tom shifted, wincing slightly, and Jack immediately noticed, moving closer without comment or hesitation. Judgment, questions asked aloud there now. "You're hurt?" Jack said, stating fact, not blame, already planning next steps despite fatigue. "Cold?" Pressure mounting slowly here tonight. Tom shook his head, stubbornness flaring, then sighed, conceding pain he'd ignored for hours earlier alone walking cold roads outside. Lena watched them, recognizing the language of men taught to endure silently without complaint, weakness, pause, or rest ever before. Jack knelt, checking Tom carefully, movements efficient, respectful, never rushed despite time, pressure, danger outside growing steadily closer now again. The dog stayed close, watching Jack's hands, ready to respond if needed without sound, movement, distraction, fear present there still. Tom breathed through clenched teeth, pride loosening as trust slowly replaced it between breaths, moments, seconds passing quietly here now. Outside, the storm howled, but inside, decisions were being made with care and shared responsibility weight accepted fully together now. The lantern cast a narrow circle of light as Jack finished checking Tom's leg, tightening the wrap where swelling had begun. Tom sat still, jaw clenched, letting the work happen without comment. Lena watched every movement, memorizing details the way people do when they're afraid something might be taken from them again. "It'll hold," Jack said. "You shouldn't walk on it anymore tonight." Tom nodded, relief and frustration crossing his face together. Years of self-reliance didn't disappear easily. The dog shifted closer to Jack, lying down once the tension eased. His breathing slowed, confidence returning now that the immediate danger felt contained. Jack rested a hand briefly on the dog's shoulder, grounding himself without realizing it. Lena broke the silence. "If you hadn't stopped." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Jack shook his head once. "I almost didn't." That truth sat between them, heavy but honest. Tom looked at him carefully. "Why did you?" Jack considered the question longer than necessary. "Because he wouldn't let me keep driving." The dog's tail thumped once against the floor. Lena smiled faintly, the expression tired but genuine. "Then I'm glad he's stubborn." Outside, the storm pressed on, but inside the shed, the fear had softened into something quieter, something survivable, something shared. Hours passed in fragments. No one slept fully, but they rested in turns, leaning into stillness when the body allowed it. Jack stayed awake longest, listening to the wind, measuring time by the lantern's flame and the rise and fall of breathing around him. Lena dozed briefly, head resting against Tom's shoulder. Tom remained awake, staring at the wall, thoughts moving faster than his injured body could. The dog kept watch, lifting his head at every sharp gust, then settling again when nothing followed. Tom finally spoke, voice low. "I thought leaving her would make things easier." Jack didn't answer right away. "I thought if I fixed the car, Everything else would fall back into place. Tom continued. I didn't think about what staying would cost her. Jack met his eyes. Sometimes staying costs more than leaving. Tom swallowed. I see that now. Lena stirred slightly but didn't wake. Tom adjusted his arm carefully, protecting her without moving her. Jack stood and checked the door seals again, reinforcing what little protection the shed offered. He wasn't just guarding them from the storm. He was guarding the fragile calm that had settled between them. Outside, the wind began to change, losing some of its anger. Inside, resolve quietly took its place. Morning announced itself slowly, not with sunlight, but with a thinning of sound. The wind softened first, its howl dropping into a distant murmur. Snow still fell, but gently now, no longer striking the walls with force. Jack noticed the shift immediately. He stepped outside briefly, scanning the road. Visibility had improved just enough to see farther than before. The storm was loosening its grip. When he returned, Lena was awake, watching him. Is it better? She asked. It's changing, Jack said. That matters. Tom exhaled, tension easing from his shoulders. I was afraid I'd made everything worse. You didn't, Lena said quietly. We're still here. The dog stretched, standing and shaking snow from his coat before settling again. His posture was relaxed now, threat assessment complete. Jack checked his phone once more. A single bar flickered, then held. He stepped aside, making the call quickly, efficiently. He gave coordinates, conditions, injuries. He didn't dramatize. He didn't need to. When he finished, he turned back to them. They're on their way. Lena closed her eyes, relief washing over her face. Tom nodded, emotion tightening his throat. Jack leaned against the wall, suddenly aware of his own exhaustion. But he stayed standing. The sound of the engine came faintly at first, barely distinguishable from the wind. Then it grew clearer, steadier, undeniable. Lena heard it before anyone else. That's them, she whispered. Jack stepped outside, raising an arm as the rescue vehicle emerged through the thinning snow. He guided them in movements precise, calm, practiced. The responders moved carefully, respectfully. They assessed Tom, secured Lena, asked questions without rushing answers. The dog stayed close to Jack, watching the exchange with quiet approval. As Lena was prepared to be transferred, she reached for Jack's sleeve. You didn't have to do all of this. Jack shook his head. Someone did. Tom met Jack's gaze, gratitude heavy and unspoken. I won't forget this. You don't have to, Jack replied. Just go home. The responders loaded them in, doors closing gently. The engine started again, tires crunching over snow as the vehicle pulled away. The shed felt empty suddenly. Jack stood there, breath visible in the cold air. The dog pressed against his leg, steady and warm. The storm was fading now, and for the first time in a long while, Jack didn't feel the urge to leave immediately. The shed grew quiet after the rescue vehicle disappeared, its sound fading into the soft hush of falling snow. Jack stayed where he was, hands resting at his sides, as if waiting for something else to demand his attention. Nothing did. The urgency that had driven every decision through the night finally released him. The dog moved first, stepping into the open space Lena and Tom had occupied, sniffing the air once before returning to Jack's side. He leaned in, solid and familiar. Jack rested a hand on his head, fingers sinking into warm fur. They didn't rush to leave. There was no reason to. The storm had taken something out of Jack, but it had also given something back. A reminder that stopping didn't always mean failure. Sometimes it meant choosing correctly. Jack stepped outside again, scanning the road. The world looked different now. Not safer, just clearer. The tracks left by the rescue vehicle cut clean lines through the snow, proof that movement forward was possible. He thought about Lena's calm, Tom's fear, The way both had trusted him without knowing anything about who he was. That trust sat with him heavy but steady. Jack returned to the truck, opened the door, and waited for the dog to jump in first. The drive down the mountain was slow, careful, but no longer tense. Snow still covered the road, yet the wind had eased enough to let the world breathe again. Jack kept both hands on the wheel, posture relaxed in a way it hadn't been in years. The dog sat upright, watching the road ahead, alert but calm. His work was done. Everything now felt like movement rather than reaction. Jack passed the place where he'd first stopped. The tracks were already fading, softened by fresh snowfall. If someone passed later, they might never know what had happened there. That felt right. He thought about how close he'd come to driving past. How easily the night could have ended differently. The realization didn't fill him with guilt. It filled him with clarity. At the bottom of the pass, Jack pulled over briefly and shut off the engine. Silence settled around them. He rested his forehead against the steering wheel, breathing slowly. The dog shifted, nudging his arm. "I know," Jack said quietly. He straightened, started the engine again, and continued down the road. He didn't know where he was headed next. For the first time, that uncertainty didn't feel like emptiness. Felt like space. By the time Jack reached the highway, the sky had begun to lighten, pale gray pushing gently against the last of the night. The world looked tired but intact. He stopped for fuel, moving through the routine with practiced ease, nodding at the attendant without conversation. Back in the truck, he checked his phone. A message blinked onto the screen. An unfamiliar number. "We made it. She's warm. She's safe. Thank you." Jack stared at the words longer than necessary. He didn't reply right away. He didn't need to. Knowing was enough. The dog watched him, tail thumping once. Jack drove on, leaving the mountains behind. Traffic increased. Noise returned. Life resumed its normal pace, unaware of what had almost been lost overnight. He realized something then. He hadn't been running from the past when he took the mountain road. He'd been avoiding the present, avoiding moments that asked something of him. Last night had asked, and he had answered. Jack adjusted his grip on the wheel, shoulders settling into a posture that felt earned. The road stretched ahead, ordinary and open. For the first time in a long while, Jack didn't feel like a man passing through. He felt like someone still capable of staying. Jack pulled into a quiet rest stop as the sun finally broke through the clouds. Light spilled across the pavement, thin but determined, warming the edges of the day. He shut off the engine and sat there, letting the moment land fully. The dog jumped down, stretched, then sat beside him, facing the open sky. Jack followed his gaze, breathing in cold air that no longer felt hostile. He thought about how easily people misjudge strength, how often it's confused with endurance instead of choice. Lena hadn't needed someone strong. She'd needed someone willing to stop. Jack understood now that stopping didn't undo who he was, clarified it. He reached down, scratching the dog behind the ears. "Good work," he murmured. The dog leaned into the touch, satisfied. Jack stepped out of the truck, standing still as cars passed nearby. No one noticed him. No one needed to. The night's work didn't require witnesses. When he got back in, he didn't rush. He checked the mirrors, adjusted his seat, and took one last look at the mountains in the distance. Then he drove on. Not because he was done helping, but because he finally knew he hadn't lost the ability to do it. Some moments don't announce themselves as turning points. They arrive quietly, asking only that we notice them and choose to stop. If the story stayed with you, let it stay a little longer. Subscribe, like, or turn on the bell if you want more stories like this. And tell us in the comments what this one meant to you or where you're watching from. Thank you for listening.